Brilliant. Well, I really enjoyed that background, that Domo really is a platform that is extending kind of far beyond even that original vision, that actually it is built ultimately to get some value. I think where Adam commented, it's for a business executive. That's not to say that nobody else uses it. In fact, it's everybody else using it that gets value, because nobody buys Domo for a glorious interface. Nobody buys Domo for the fact that it's really fast or that it scales. We've been entrusted as Domo users with precious amounts of time and resources to achieve something that's bigger than the investment put in. We're looking to create value from our investment. And that's precious, because as every business, we have limited time and resources and an unlimited volume of priorities. And today I want to cover how we get to value without needing to stumble onto it, where we can plan for value, where we can measure value, and ultimately where we can find the biggest impacts. I'm Brett Gibson, Director of Strategy and Value Consulting for Domo in EMEA. What does that mean? It means for customers. I work with prospects and customers to work out how they can plan and measure and realize value. Where do they put their chips on the roulette wheel to make sure that it's going to pay off best? Internally, I look after strategy and analytics for EMEA, and that means that I'm the one supporting our business executives to answer the same question. Where are we focusing our time? How are we empowering managers? Where do we get the biggest bang for our buck? I'm joined today by Andrew Chaffin, and we'll walk through basically how we can bubble up and capture some of this value, that it's not just one directional. But this audience has got Domo. So congratulations, you've been Domoed. We've all gotten the email. And so while a new customer for Domo will possibly be in a different place, I think we're all in a place that says, yeah, now that we've got Domo, we don't want to be the dog who caught its tail and looks a bit confused. Yeah, we've got our dream, we've got Domo. How do we plan for value? How do we measure value? Where can we find some of the biggest potential impacts? And are there any frameworks that we can be using to achieve this? So why don't we start with the frameworks? If you've kicked off a Domo project, you may have come across the 4D, the momentum methodology, and the 4D value statement. And this may have been something that one of your sales representatives walked through before your contract. It may have been your customer success manager who walked through this process with you at the start of your journey. But basically, if you haven't seen this, what we're looking to do is provide a framework for how we can capture the expected benefits from our Domo implementation. So starting off with a business initiative, that there's got to be a reason why we're doing something. Moving on to the business problem, something that we're trying to fix. We've always, in our mind, and this may be one of those unknown knowns. We don't even know we know it, but of course we know it. We have an idea of how we're going to gauge success, what the metrics we use are, and then finally that we understand what the actual impact is. And I think this is really the key thing that we need to focus on. Is it's not just that we know what metrics we're going to use in cards and reports. It's that we understand how big of an impact this is going to make to the bottom line, or to the people who are sponsoring this project, so that we can tell whether it's a success or not. And we can tell whether this should be a priority over the other things that we could be doing. Below this is a value driver, value category framework that you may have seen Jay and I discuss previously on his YouTube channel. But I think one of the key things that is worth factoring in when we think about how we prioritize our projects and how we evaluate the benefits that we get, we can start bucketing them into largely 3 areas of value. One is probably the easiest, the productivity gains. It used to take me this long to do something, but now I can automate it. Now I don't need to wait for my reports. Now I can get an alert email to me, so I'm not waiting on something and having to log in just to find there was nothing left to evaluate. And so productivity gains, really easy way to capture some of the value. Then we get to the stuff that your CFO is going to be very interested in. It's your cost savings, and particularly hard cost savings. We used to have to spend this, now we don't have to spend it. Revenue gains. We can sell faster, more, better, higher margin products or longer duration products that a CFO says, yeah, I can book revenue out 3 years instead of 1, that's great. Or I can bring revenue forward into this quarter. And so we can start looking at the revenue growth that's attached to a project. And then finally is the risk reduction or the governance layer. And this is an interesting value category, because sometimes it isn't about revenue growth and cost savings. Sometimes it is just saying we can do better, we can reduce our risk, or we can increase the confidence of our managers in their decision-making ability so that we can go faster than we used to, that we don't have to double check our work the same way that we used to. And that means we can iterate a little bit faster. So if you haven't come across value drivers before, go back and take a look at YouTube. You search for Jay and you'll find it at Onyx Reporting. The big question of how we avoid stumbling onto value and really planning for it is starting to understand how we link our data strategy to our business strategy, and particularly the problems that we're looking to solve. So how do we link business problems to impact? The nice thing about BI is it's all about data, and ultimately data informs decisions. So our BI strategy and our data strategy really can be the sort of platform by which we can influence any part of our business. Now, that doesn't mean that every business problem is a data problem. At the end of the day, sometimes there are unknown unknowns. Sometimes it's more than data, it's on the execution. So we can take it so far. But if we can define that business problem in terms of the data problem, what data would answer this? What questions are we actually trying to answer and get in front of, respond to faster? That allows us to take the next step, which is how we convert the data problem into a solution. So previously, if we take that tried and trusted marketing use case of, I need to make sure that my paid media is more effective and I'm using it best so I can reallocate it across channel. Well, that's my business problem, is I've only got a certain amount of money to spend, and I need to make sure that that's working really hard. The data problem is, how do I work out where my money is best spent across channels, on the types of conversion that we're looking for? Now we've defined that as a data problem. We can go to solution. Well, if I could see all of our data side by side, which channel performs at which part of our funnel, I can make a decision. That's where I can decide what content is working, what channel is working, how much to spend, and maybe run experiments to see what works. How much can we pull back without impacting the actual number of leads that we get? Once we've defined that solution, really where the rubber hits the road is now how we can implement that data solution into business process and start using it. The fact that we can then start capturing results means that we can go back and look at whether we fixed the problem. And the faster we can do that loop, the iterative process, getting that done rapidly without having to wait for additional data engineering services or the volume of data that's clogging things up, that's where I can start measuring it and start making new decisions, working out whether we've answered that problem sufficiently to move on to something else, and whether we can actually determine how much our decision has impacted the business. And really, that's what BI leverage at cloud scale and in record time is all about. So when you're thinking about your value planning process, a few of the ways that Domo can help you frame some of the potential solutions and some of the potential levers that you can be using to influence your value prioritization and your project prioritization. So one of them, unite that data from absolutely everywhere. Yeah, that we don't need to wait to integrate it, that we're not building custom solutions to integrate data, that we can automate that, that we can empower different types of users. So this is really where that, the solutions are quick to build, but more than that, we're also able to empower any user who needs to make a decision with the type of data that they need to make that decision. And finally, it's about unlocking business value from the business or for the business, whether that's self-service BI, whether that's monetizing data in ways that you previously couldn't, whether that's building solutions and applications via a low-code framework, that means that you can start doing things that your current application stack and your current technology strategy doesn't support. That's what Domo's about. So coming back to business planning, the type of value assessments that Domo goes through, this is probably one of the key questions that we get asked is, what format should I expect? How deep do we go? Because the reality is you can get really into the weeds. And some people will say, I don't have a financial background. I don't want to be running net present value calculations on this investment, or IRR and internal rate of return calculations. And that's perfectly fine. The reality is you need to ask who's the audience that you're building this plan for and this business case for, and what decisions will they be taking off it? Because if the business case or this plan is really just about how do we get in the ballpark of what kind of value we might realize, who's going to use it? It's internal for our team because we've got a dozen different things we could be using, but we just don't know where to start. Which one is going to take our initial effort? Suddenly, we don't need an extensive business case. We only need to do enough to satisfy that question for us, an informal value assessment that helps us prioritize. Finally, then we go to a bit more of a business case for review. And often this will take place with your manager or with some of your peers, where you are competing with other people for project resources and funding and permission to proceed, but you're not getting finance involved. It's more about our team's resource allocation, and potentially I'm pulling in one or two resources to support externally. And then finally, we may go to a very formal business case because we need formal funding approval from the finance office from within an annual funding cycle. And in this case, maybe we do need to go a little bit further. There's going to be Excel involved. Maybe I should say there's going to be a lot more Excel involved. And we're ultimately trying to satisfy that we're going to meet a hurdle rate that we've got, but also that we're competing for a pool of funding in a formal process. And we want our business case to be as tight as it can be. What does that actually look like? It depends. So in some cases, we've really started with a bit more of an opportunity summary. Why don't we just clarify what our options are and how much we think this is going to be worth? And it's a little bit more back of an envelope calculations. Top right, we're looking at some summaries of what we've done so far, some of the use cases we could extend to, and roughly what that benefit is. What wasn't done in this case, which has obviously been anonymized, is how much effort is this going to take? If we were to say, this is 10 units, this is 20 units, can we actually work out which is the better cost benefit? Or are we just looking for net impact? We need to start with the biggest impact or the most politically influential team to start getting traction. You can go down the Excel path. This one, it gets a little bit more complex if we start getting into net present value and internal rates of return. But the reality is, it's just math. we can approach this. And if it is a formal review, there'll often be templates that are used. If there's not, easy enough to find some of those. And we tend to, internally with our value consulting work, we'll adopt this approach because it's very quick to capture some information and do your analysis. But ultimately, if what we're trying to do is convince somebody to take a particular path of action, we probably want to put it in Domo, because why wouldn't we? It's not right for every case, but being able to show your understanding of this is where we're starting, this is why we're starting, the type of value drivers or value realization we can get across that productivity and hard cost savings. This is a process we've done before, and we've seen it done very well by teams within organizations. Now, your miles may vary, but consider who your audience is and what it is that you're trying to achieve. So where do we go to from here? And where do good ideas come from? Now, often we can look at this coming from two ways, top down or bottom up. If we look at top down, these are often strategy driven, they're business priority driven. If we look at an example, and actually the little icon there, I think if you've got children or if you're just a fan of Disney movies, Ratatouille, the Augustin Gusteau, where he said, yeah, anyone can cook. Value can come from anywhere. It doesn't mean that everyone is going to deliver value, but we need to consider that bottom-up approach because value identification can come from anyone. If we take the example of the steam train company, a top-down approach is, we are a very successful steam train company. The board is filled with, and our executive ranks are filled with people who know the steam company business. We do the best thing in steam train land. And so we're hiring people who understand the business and can optimize that. They have a steam train mentality. They have the experience. The downside of this top-down approach is that it can be excruciatingly slow. Business planning cycles happen, and the prioritization and coordination across teams can be slow. But that slowness is offset by some big upsides because big changes are possible. You're able to get lots of support if you can get the momentum up. And in most cases, because you're aligning to the business strategy, this is also aligned with KPIs and management objectives. And so the bonuses are probably easier to get this way. This is why we plan, is because we can get evidence to say our strategy is working. And if we go back to the steam train company, basically what we're saying is, I can optimize. We can prioritize by saying a better shovel will help us eke out another 1% on when we shovel coal into the engine. And a certain width of track or the next mile of track can be here. And it's very tactical. It's aligned with the strategy, but it doesn't necessarily account for the fact that our competitors are starting to do something else. Internal combustion engines mean that maybe we don't need to own the tracks because the public are funding roads. We don't need the capital because our competitors are doing that. They're seeing the opportunity and it's bigger than us. Now, the top-down approach may see this, but it's going to be slower to get there and it's going to be slower to move. Eventually, you're going to need strategic top-down support in order to make these big shifts. But quite often you can get a lot faster insight into some of the changes or some of the real tactical approaches that it's not the shape of the shovel or the size of the shovel that we're picking up the coal with. It's that 10% of our workforce are left-handed. That might be the type of suggestion that we need bubbling up from people at the coalface, literally. Didn't mean to say that, but at the coalface. It's tactical. The upside is you can get very innovative ideas. You can kind of take those ideas from the real world and you can implement them fast and top down. But they do need sponsorship. If I am the person at the coalface who's saying, we are seeing our orders drop off from our customers because they're starting to see they can get a lot closer to their depots or right to their depots, and our competitors are picking something up. Yeah, that's something that we need to act on, but I probably need some support for how do I test this idea? How do I work out if there's a different way that we can approach it? So, Andrew, why don't I introduce you here, because when Andrew and I spoke and Jay joined us, there was a fascinating approach for how we can build up hypotheses or build up this value repository from bottom up.
Thanks for the intro, Brett. One piece of trivia, it makes you super popular at parties. What came first, the chicken or the egg? Usually that question is meant just as a rhetorical question, but there's a real answer. The egg came first, and it came from an animal that wasn't quite a chicken. That's how evolution works. And there's such a thing as Darwinian evolution of ideas, right? And that's kind of what we're talking about here. There's this iterative process that we need to go through in order to get to value. We call it the scientific method. It happens everywhere. What you see on the screen is that process and the steps that you should probably take to iterate your way to value. You're starting with questioning, right? Questions can come from anybody, come from somebody on the front line, can come from the CEO. Those questions tend to form good explanations in the person's mind, which then form hypotheses. Now, when I get a hypothesis or when I get an idea, probably the next thing that I should do is say it out loud, talk to somebody about it, question my own assumptions, and we can talk to each other about what the ramifications of these ideas and these explanations might be. And those will create tests, things that we can actually try, experiments we can actually run and see what the results would be. And then when we get those results, we can report them back to anyone else that might be interested in knowing what those results were. And then we can repeat, right? This is a Darwinian cycle of evolution towards value. We built a little app. If you don't mind, Brett, I'll share my screen. We built a little app to help in this process. This is kind of getting right to the idea of like, how can Domo be helpful above and beyond just normal data presentation, right? When I was at Domo, I worked there for, 8 years. I was an account development rep for a while. So I was banging on doors trying to get sales cycles going. And our leadership was saying, hey, dial, get on the phone and make a bunch of phone calls that will generate opportunities. As I actually did the job, I realized, well, it does kind of, but I've noticed that if I look at the forms that are being filled out, what information is coming in, what are the titles that I'm seeing, what are the company names, what fields are missing, I can kind of intuit which opportunities are the real ones, which leads are the ones that are best to pursue. And if I am a little bit more strategic in my pursuing of those particular leads, I'm more successful. Maybe I should do that instead of just randomly dialing all the time. So it formed a hypothesis for me. So I'm thinking, right, I'm asking a question, like, is this the best way to do this? And it formed a hypothesis or an idea in my mind, like maybe dials don't absolutely predict sales qualified leads. So I ran the test. I got the data from our analyst. I ran the experiment to see if dials, the number of dials, would predict the number of sales qualified leads that were produced. It didn't. There wasn't a correlation. I was able to take that to management. We were able to have the conversation and try to figure out what activities do predict sales qualified leads and generating actual deals. Now, fortunately, I was able to have that conversation internally, and the conversation, I think, could have gone even better if I had a tool that would help me articulate the idea and get it in front of the right people. And that's the idea with this app, with Idea Hub. The idea in here is that you can come when you have an idea, when you have a hypothesis, and you can submit the idea. The app will help you think through your idea, think through your hypothesis. It'll help you state it in a way that is engageable by your audience. It'll help you formulate ideas around how you can prove you're right or wrong. What data do we need to collect? Do we already have that data? What assumptions do you have? What impact could this have to the business, to Brett's previous discussion? And then again, who should interact with this idea that you're submitting? Now, if I had had this tool, I could have said, well, I think that increasing dials won't increase sales qualified leads reliably. In fact, look at this card. I built this card. It looks like there's no correlation between dials and sales qualified leads. This seems like proof to me. I don't know if I'm using the data correctly or incorrectly. If you could help me validate this idea, I think there's a lot of value here, because there's a big potential here. All of the marketing budget that we're spending, which might be millions of dollars, correlates to a certain number of converted leads with the way we're doing it today. We're also paying a marketing team, you're paying an account development team, and you have a certain conversion rate right now on opportunities. We could potentially impact all of those just through a better part of process here. Here's the people I think should look at this and evaluate this idea, and I can submit the idea. And you can see that this starts a conversation. Someone saying, well, hey, when we did a call blitz last week, it seemed like we generated a lot of opportunities. So this doesn't really make sense. And then I can respond and I can give my extra evidence. And we can have this conversation around this idea and form hypotheses, tests that we can implement and drive the business towards more value in an evolutionary way, right? We're taking these ideas, we're testing them, and we're going through this evolutionary process internally towards value. So if you would like to participate in this, this is our V1 of our iterate towards value through evolutionary ideating. We would love to have you participate. You can hit me up, Andrew, at CrystalBallers.ai. We're excited to start this journey with whoever's interested.
That was awesome, Andrew. Thank you so much. And Brett, thank you for your presentation. I should share my screen. I wanted to go back to that slide that you put up for half a moment because I thought it was so incredibly compelling. This one here. Can y'all see my screen?
Yep.
This idea of taking a business problem and translating it to a data problem and then expressing that problem as a data problem, which you can then build a solution around. I think that's something that people at all levels of the business struggle with, not just kind of in that strategic conversation around how do I do more cool stuff with Domo, but even in the dojo. A lot of times when Grant and I are looking at the questions people are posting, we're saying, hey, well, I'm saying, because I'm a little bit rude like that, can you express that in plain English? Like, what are you trying to accomplish? Where's the gap? And what are you trying to get to? And so I hope for all of you who are in this call that you take this opportunity to come back to this material and take a look at what Andrew and Brett were talking about, because yeah, that was pretty wicked. Real quick, like Andrew, Michael asks, is the idea to create an idea hub for our customers on their Domo instance?
I'm assuming the presumption in the question is I'm a consultant or I work at Domo, and the idea is I can provide this as a service to our customers. Yeah, so this app is the V1 that I showed you, got done on Friday. We're putting it into the App Store hopefully this week. And so, yeah, if you would like to present this to your customers as a tool to help them ideate towards value, we would love to help you present that to them, and they can get it from the App Store and buy it and have it available to use.
Yeah, we are going to have a presentation later on in the week about building custom apps. This, like Andrew was saying, is a custom app that he had his company built. But yeah, we're going to have more presentations on Friday if for the rest of you who are like, oh, how did Andrew build that? We're not going to build his app, but we're going to build an app.